This video is about in-text citation according to APA Style 7th edition. Let's look at this example. This is an APA Style student paper, 7th edition. When we look at the in-text citations, what that means is that there's going to be an idea or a concept that is coming from another source. So when you are working on your research paper, I'm going to scroll down and go to the very last page. In APA, where you list all of your sources, is called the references list. In this list, of course, it has to be in alphabetical order. So you would not put your references according to the order in which you cite them in your paper, but you do so in alphabetical order because this makes it easier for the professor or your audience to be able to follow your sources. Every time you have a citation here, that means that you have to have a citation inside the text. So that means that you are either quoting or paraphrasing from all of these sources inside the body of your essay. Let's take a look at an example that only has one author. We're going to start off with the very first one, Achterberg. J, that's the author. Here's the year in which this source was published. Here's the title. And here's the company that published this item. From looking at this, I can tell, because of the way that they've listed these elements, that is coming from a book. So that means that somewhere in this essay, our Achterberg is being quoted or paraphrased, an idea from him. So this is an example of one source with one author. So now let's go into the paper, and I'm going to cheat. I am going to do the Control F, and I'm going to look up Achterberg. Okay, so right here, I'm going to close out of this. And Achterberg is right here. So this is the in-text citation in parentheses. So what I can tell from here is, starting in this sentence, right over here, all of this over here, this is the student's own words to state something that Achterberg said. So they're not directly quoting actually from the book, but they're just looking at the information presented by this author, Achterberg, and presenting it in their own voice, their own way that they speak. That means that they took this person's idea and used their own words. Maybe they used different synonyms or related terms and expressed it in a particular way that it is the student's words. So it's just a paraphrase. But even if it is a paraphrase and the student created that paraphrase, they still need to say where the source came from. So this is how they're doing it. Inside the parentheses at the end of the sentence, I'm going to make this bigger. And notice here's where the sentence begins. Then it continues on all the way here. This is still the student talking, but saying this person's idea. And notice there's nothing else here. Then in parentheses, there's the last name of the author, comma, space, and then the year of publication. And they close the parentheses, and then they put a period. Then from there, they could add additional sentences. They are not using the page number here because it's not a direct quote. So according to APA style, if you're paraphrasing, you do not have to list the page number. So this is an example of how you would paraphrase if there's one source, one author. And I'm going to scroll down and notice over here, Ute and Miller. This is another source, but this one has two different authors. So if a source has two authors or two co-authors or two people who created or worked on the project and are named as the authors or creators, then you list them both inside the parentheses. So again, here is the sentence. It is not a quote. It is also a paraphrase. And then there's the parentheses. Then they have the first author. Then they have the space. Then the ampersand. Then another space. And then the second author, comma, space, and then the year of publication. Now let's find this source, because based on this, I don't know if this is a book, if it's a YouTube video, if it's a magazine article, I don't know. All I know is that the concept in this sentence actually came from this source. So I can go scroll all the way down to the references list and look for Utay and Miller. We're scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling to the U's. And here's Utay and Miller. And from here, then I could try to find the source based on the information from the citation. So here's Utay and Miller, the year that it was published, basically how you would do the rest of the citations. Here's the title of whatever the source is, and then here I discover, oh, it is coming from a journal. There's the volume, there's the issue, and then there's a page range. So from there, I could go in and either go to the internet or go to the library's databases or use OneSearch to try to retrieve this particular source. Now, notice how here they've listed Utay and Miller. They did not move Miller to the beginning, right? They started with Utay and Miller, most likely because this is how it was presented in the source. So if I were to pull up this particular article, these two authors are going to be listed in this particular order. And that's how you want to keep it. You don't just want to move over in alphabetical order and move Miller to the beginning of this citation. But you do want to alphabetize all of the entries, right? All of the entries here on this list, those are in alphabetical order. However, if it's two authors for one source, you leave them as they are listed in the source, because they did have a conversation about who was going to be listed first. Now, what if a source, like for example, this one has three authors, Sherwitz, McHenry, and Herrero. Here's 1, 2, 3. Again, you would list those three authors in the order as they are listed in the article or in the book. Now let's see how I'm gonna look for it in the paper. Now looking for search. There we go, here we go. Here he is, right here. Now, the sentence starts up here. And again, this is also a paraphrase. They're paraphrasing from the source. But notice how here they've listed Sherwitz. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. And they didn't list all three authors. They just listed the first author mentioned in the source, space, ET space AL dot, comma, space, and the year of publication. So what that means is if a source that you are citing in your essay has 3 or more authors, just list the first one. And then you're going to say et al. Dot and then the year for the first and every time. In APA 6th edition, the older edition, because right now we're talking about the 7th edition, but the older edition, that was different. That means that if this particular source was listed, you first have to list all of the authors first, the very first time that you quote or cite from them, and then the second, third, and the other times, then you could do this. So this is a good change to make it easier for students. That means that now you don't have to worry about, okay, so if this is the first time that I'm citing from this source that has 3 or more authors, I don't have to list them all at the beginning. And then the second and the rest of the times, then just say the first last name and then et al, doing it this way. So you don't have to worry about that. The first and every time, you can just do it this way. And again, this is also a paraphrase. Now, let's take a look at this one up here. L. Plum, Personal Communication, March 17th, 2019. I can tell that from here, it says personal communication. So what that means to me is that this is not a source that has an official publication that I could go to YouTube and try to find it. That means it's probably a discussion between two people. I'm going to scroll up a little bit just to see what the context, and here's the sentence. And here's just talking about, here's a paraphrase. And then that means that this is coming from this particular person who may have said something like this, and this student or the person writing this, they're just quoting, or no, not quoting, I'm sorry, paraphrasing from this person, from a conversation, a personal communication or a conversation that happened on March 17th, 2019. So that is the way how you could also cite if you have conversations. If you're doing a sociology project or a psychology project and you're talking to other people, you can cite from them. You can cite them in the body of your essay. But because it's not a published work, it's not like I can go into a database and find that conversation, then I wouldn't list it in the references list, right? So let's see if this one is in here, Plum. Let's see if Plum is on this list, because it shouldn't be. And it is not. So that would be a way to also cite other sources in parentheses to tell your audience that what you're saying is actually coming from another source, not from you, but it's not a published source or a place where other people can go in and find it. Now, let's see. So YouTube videos. So here's an example of a YouTube video. This is the uploader or the username that uploaded this video on this date. Notice this year, comma, month, and day. Then here's the title of the video. Notice that it's in italics, and it's also using that sentence capitalization where you only capitalize the first word, or I mean the first letter in the first word of the title and then the subtitle, or any personal pronouns. In brackets, you're going to say that it's a video. And period, space, and you're going to say then YouTube, because that's where it came from. Or if it's Vimeo or wherever the source is for this. And then you're going to put a period, space, and the URL. Make sure that this URL works and it takes you and your audience to the proper place. But then how do you cite that in your paper if you were paraphrasing or quoting from it? So let's scroll up. And this one, I just threw that in here. This is just an example of how to do the citation within the body of your essay. Not that it actually flows with this particular one. I just threw that in. So here's, that's my sentence. And then here's the direct quote in quotation marks. Then I have a space. I don't have a period here. I just have a space. Then in parentheses, right, beginning my parentheses, I list the uploader. If in the upload, if you go to YouTube and the video shows a name of somebody who uploaded the video, you're going to put that in instead. But this one, this is big thing, is the actual YouTube account that makes this video, so that produces these videos. Comma, space, then the year in which this video was uploaded. Comma, space, and the timestamp from when this particular quote is coming from. So again, you can also cite videos, but when you do so, you're going to include the author of the video or the uploader in this case, comma, space, the year that it was published in, not the full date, but just the year, comma, and then the timestamp from your video player of where the quote starts. All right, so then that's how to do a YouTube video. Now let's look at a group as the author. Let's look at the second one. The second one is a source. In this particular case, it's a website, the American Psychological Association. So this is a group of people, or it could be a government agency or a department. This organization in 2017 created this publication, Stress in America, State of Our Union. So that I could tell that it's a website, or this one is a PDF document, and here's the URL. So then how would I cite that in my source? So I'm going to scroll up and let's look for the American, what is it called? The American Psychological Association. Let's look for that in the paper. If I have that source and I want to quote or paraphrase, okay, so I found it right here. So here is also a paraphrase, and in parentheses is the association, the group of people that made this statement, comma, space, the year of publication, close the parentheses, and then put the period. So that also means that it is a paraphrase. They're paraphrasing from the source. If the source has a direct quotation, we would then have to add a page number. So if the source that you're using has a page number, because it's in either an ebook that has the page numbers or a PDF version of an article or a report, it would have the page numbers. Let's just pretend, just to show you an example, that this is a direct quote, right? So here, I have my own thought. Here's a direct quote from this source. Then I'm going to do comma, space, P dot, and then 45. And you say that that's where the page came from. So I only add the page number if it has, if I'm using a direct quotation, word for word, what the source is saying. So then, now what if the source that I'm using doesn't have page numbers and I'm taking a direct quote from it? So then this is where it gets a little trickier, because APA does say that you could use maybe a heading to guide your audience. If it's a really long work of, text or a long thing of video, if it's a video, then you would have the timestamp. But if it's a one large website and you're taking a direct quote from it, try to find either a section or a heading. You may even count the paragraphs, and just then, instead of putting the P here, it will be para. From paragraph 4. Now, double check with your professor to see if this is something that they want, because this is just a recommendation from APA, just to help your audience find your direct quote. But if it's an online source, you can always just use the Control F and try to find it in there. So there are other ways to work around it. But I just wanted to let you guys know that that could also be an option that you may have to do depending on your professor. Okay, so just a quick review. This particular source here, notice that it has the last name, comma, the year, and notice here it has a semicolon and a space, and then it has another author, comma, and the year. That means that this particular sentence here has content that comes from these two sources. So sometimes when you're looking at different sources, especially if you found a really great article and they're quoting from another article and you try to find that other article and you have them and they great ideas from both of them, or one is a work that is based on another, then they might be saying the same thing and you want to quote from both of them. So that means that there's an idea or a concept from here that is coming from these two sources. So I could go in and try to find Jacobson and Trachtenberg. So let's look for those, because those should be two separate entries. Jacobson, go to the end. Here's Jacobson, and then the other one, Trachtenberg, and is right here. So see, there's also a way that you could cite from two sources at the same time if both sources are saying the same thing. Now, you don't have to do it all at the end. You don't have to use the parenthetical all at the end. You could split them up. So for example, let's take a look at this one, this particular sentence here. This one, they have their own words or their own transition or their own signal phrase. then here's the quote, because they're using the authors as part of their sentence. But right after they mention the authors, then they're going to also list in parentheses the year of publication. So from here, I can say Cohen and Fried, 2007, and then here's the paraphrase. The paraphrase is all right here. So I should be able to go in and find Cohen and Fried. That should be one source, published in 2007, and this is their idea. So you don't have to always just end the sentence with the last name and the year of publication. You can mix it up a bit so that way you have more fun as you're working on your essay. So we've talked about paraphrasing. Now, if you're doing direct quotation, as long as it's 39 words or less, you can put it within the body of your essay. But let's just say you're taking a really long quotation, like 40 words or more, directly word for word from another source. So what you're going to do is set that aside, and you do so right here. Here's an example of what they call a long quotation or a block quote. And here, this is the regular paragraph all right here. And notice it starts here, Roche et al. So that means this is a work with multiple authors, 3 or more authors. The year of publication is this. This is pretty much the same as how you would do any of them other citations. And then you have your transitional components. Then they have the colon here. And then they set off the complete quotation right here. Notice that it is indented 1/2 inch from the left margin. So this is 40 words or more, a direct quotation. Now I want to point out this piece here. Notice that this is the only time in which you would put the period after the quote, that you're going to put a space, and because it is word for word from the source, this is where you need to put in the page number. So this whole little paragraph or big long sentences, word for word from Roche, and here's the page number. Notice you don't put anything else here. Then you can continue on with the rest of your essay. This could also be done in a different way. You could move this over here and just say Roche. And just say great, blah, 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 whatever sentence you want to put in here. And that way you have the quotation, and the parenthetical notation is also down here at the end. But it works better if you have it this way, the way that the example has it, because it just flows better this way. But it's up to you depending on what you want to do. Now, I do want to warn you that this is not something that you want to do a lot, because when you're doing research papers, we want to know what you think. What do you have to contribute? We don't just want a big research article that just has big long quotes from other sources. We want you to think about it, make connections between sources, and do more paraphrasing than quoting. But sometimes a long quote is important if what it is that you're quoting is so effective from the original source, or if it's part of a speech or piece of literature or a primary source or something that is so important that it has to be stated in this way, then go ahead and do the long quotes. But try to limit those long quotes. You can use some quotes as well, but also try to use more of the paraphrasing. This is a quick video, well, not so quick, but of the most common in-text citations that you're going to run into. So of course, there are many other types. So for that, I encourage you to go and visit our website for in-text citations, or go to OWL Purdue so that you could get more information on how to do the citation. And just to review, I'm going to take you to the library's homepage. I'm going to click again on citation. And from here, you're going to click either APA or the 7th edition or the 6th edition. And again, this is where you can find the examples, the basic rules, how to do the citations for the references list. And if you want to do the in-text citation, which is what we just talked about, we have a link right here to the 6th edition. And you can also go and look at the other style guides. From Al Purdue is one of the best ones out there. And I've already talked about it in other videos. And you can scroll down, find, APA formatting and style guide. And look here, in-text citations, the basics and the authors. Click right there and it gives you basic rules about how to set it up, how to do the short quotations, what we were talking about earlier, and how to do the long quotes. Right here is an example. What to do with without pages, if your source doesn't have any pages, what I was mentioning earlier about the paragraph. And more information about authors in text, because it's mostly about linking the author within the body of your essay to the matching reference entry. So you know what to do when you have works by 2 different authors, or here's how you would do if the source has 3 or more authors, and examples on how to set those up as well. And if it's an organization, how to do that one. 2 or more works, that's, we mentioned that one in my example. And then of course it gets more complicated. Like if you have 2 different authors with the same last names, how to go about doing it. You see, it has a lot of different things that you might run into. Oh, one thing that I didn't mention is this one. So if you are quoting or paraphrasing from a source that is being quoted in another source, as an example, let's just say you found this great journal article, and in this particular journal article, they are quoting another author or another case study. So the idea is that you try to find that case study and then quote from that case study. But let's just say you tried our databases, you tried the internet, and you just can't find it. Then you can still incorporate that into your essay, but then you just have to say, Johnson said this and this, and do either the paraphrase or the direct quote. And then inside the parentheses, you're going to add as cited in the quote, the author that is quoting him. So in my essay, let's look at that as an example. So now I'm back into the example essay. So this particular one, this particular person, this is their idea being paraphrased by this student, but they didn't actually try to find, or maybe they did try to find it, but they didn't actually have this particular source where they're quoting it. So they're still quoting him through the source. So here's as cited in, then here's the source where he is being quoted from. And here's another example. Joseph Wolpe examining. So this particular idea is an idea that is being cited in another source. So that you are probably going to find as you go through and look at different articles that, different, the authors of the article that you're using or the chapter that you're using, they might be talking about another case study or something that somebody else said in another study or another publication. So again, try to find it. Try to find that publication if you really like what they said. Or if not, you can still do it. But when you say, Jane Smith, according to or as cited by, right? So then the way that you're going to work it into your essay, you're going to say, the person's name that you're quoting from, and then in parentheses, you're going to list the source where you found that quote from them. And you would list it as cited in Peterson. So that means that you're still tying in this particular idea or concept from this source, but you didn't actually find his work to quote from it. Okay. So if you run into other strange or less usual instances for paraphrasing or in-text citation, remember, use your sources, contact one of the librarians, always ask your professor. Okay, so the main idea is in parentheses, you're going to list the author's last name, comma, space, the year of publication. If it's a paraphrase, if you're paraphrasing from the source. If you're taking a direct quotation, you have to include the specific location where that quote is coming from, whether it's a page number or a section number or a timestamp if it's a video. So that's the basic idea. And of course, it's just mostly what you're going to see is works by one author or two authors as such in here. Just remember that it's slightly different from MLA because you're going to list the two authors and you're not going to write out the word and. You're going to list the ampersand. Then you're going to put a comma and you're going to add the year. And if it's a direct quotation, comma, and then the page number. That's different from MLA. In MLA, all you do is just add the last name and the page number. Whether it's a paraphrase or a direct quote, you should always list the page number if there's a page number. If there's not a page number in MLA style, you just don't worry about the page number. In APA style, you do. You try to identify that location, that page number or the section number or paragraph number if you're taking a direct quote only. If you're paraphrasing, you don't have to worry about the page numbers. You can include them if it'll help find the sources, but that's not a requirement according to APA style. So again, any questions, just let me know. You know how to reach me. Thanks.